This video was sponsored by Bosley.
Well, hello, and welcome to another video. Now you might be thinking, this video seems much classier than normal, and you can't quite put your finger on what it is. Well, let me tell you what it is. It's a pipe. The pipe. It does it every time. Immediately classes up any occasion or outfit. So I thought, why not do a video where I show you how to make your very own custom pipe? Even if you don't smoke, which I don't recommend that you do, it's bad for your health. These are just fun to make. They're classy, they're simple, and anybody can do it with just a few tools. So I'm gonna walk you through the step-by-step process on how you can make your very own pipe to make great gifts. It's not that hard. Everything you need is in the video description below. And if you're a patron, I'll even throw some extra tips and tricks your way. So make sure you go sign up on Patreon. There's a link down there as well. But without any further ado, let's get to making a pipe. There's some dust in there. Ooh. Roll the footage.
Now let me start off by saying I'm not a professional pipe maker. There are guys that have been doing this their entire lives and they could probably tell you a million things that I do wrong. But I am a pipe maker in the sense that one day I wanted to make a pipe, so I got online, did a little bit of research, and figured out just enough that I could make something that would generally pass as a pipe. So I can share just as much as I know with you. Now there's a few things you're gonna wanna get in order to make your pipe. One is wood. Now pipes are traditionally made out of briar wood. That comes from like a briar patch. And this is the burly mass that grows at the base of that patch, bush, tree, etc. Makes great pipes. You can really use any wood that you want. You just want to be careful that you're not getting something carcinogenic. Things like oak, ash. These have the cancer-causing stuff inside of them. So you don't really want to make pipes out of them. So do your research or just stick with briar. Then you're going to need some stems, or a stem if you're making a pipe. The easiest thing to do is get the pre-made stems. They come like this. They're pretty rough, but I will show you how to sand and shape and bend them so that you can make your pipe still very unique. Then you're going to want a bowl bit. Looks like this. This is the key to getting that nice bowl shape in the bottom of our pipe. I'll include a link for that. It's also helpful if you got a long drill bit. This is an 1/8 inch and that'll drill out our stem hole. And then to finish the whole thing, you're gonna wanna get some carnauba wax. This will give your pipe that perfect shine and make it as pretty as the prettiest shiny thing that you can think of. And I will walk you through each step in that process. So first, we need to lay out the shape and design of our pipe and start roughly cutting it out. So let's do that. Now, as you might imagine, there are as many designs and shapes of pipes as there are pocket holes on Pinterest. So what shape pipe you want to make really depends on your own personality and what look you're going for. Back when I was making pipes a lot, I drew up this little diagram of different shapes and sizes just for a quick reference. I will make this available on my website in a digital download if you want to get it so you can kind of have a place to start. So the best thing to do is just pick a shape that you like and then start drawing that out roughly onto your block of briar, which is what we're gonna do right now. Now here's the really fun part about making a pipe. When it comes to the actual shape of it, there's really no right or wrong way to do it. It's really just up to you and what you like. So the first thing I like to do is just roughly draw out a shape of a pipe onto my block of briar. Sometimes I'll use the pipe illustration I made for inspiration, but other times I'll just freeform it until I have what looks like a pipe. Now what is important is to make sure that we get the holes in the pipe drilled correctly. We're going to have one hole in the top for the bowl, and then we're going to have another hole coming in through the stem, and we want that hole to connect right at the bottom of our bowl for good flow of air and a proper smoke. So what I like to do is draw lines onto my block that represent where I need to drill out that hole. This will help me get everything lined up when we take the block over to the drill press. If you don't have a drill press, you can do this by hand, but it's much easier if it's locked in place in a drill press, like this. I just use a Rockler screw clamp to hold it securely, and then I get a little square to make sure that my line is perfectly up and down with that drill bit.
Now our bowl is going to be 7/8 of an inch in circumference, and we're not going to do the entire thing with the bowl bit because it's not the best at removing material. So I like to start my hole with just a regular Forstner bit, and then I'll just finish off the last little bit to give it a nice bowl shape on the bottom. So after I drill partway through with that Forstner bit, I switch it out for my bowl bit, and as you can see, I hooked a little piece of tape on there. This is my marker to make sure I don't drill too far down into the pipe. You definitely don't want to come out the bottom, or else you'll have a napkin ring, not a pipe. Unless you're going for a napkin ring, then drill all the way through that sucker. As you can see here, we now have a bowl drilled out that should be the exact depth that we marked on the outside of our block. Now before I drill the hole through my stem, I want to remove some of this material so that it's more pipe shaped. You don't have to do this, you could just go ahead and drill your stem hole, but I just like to remove as much material as I can before I drill that out, just to make sure I get that stem right where I want it. So with a few cuts on the bandsaw, zip zop zoop, I have the rough shape of my pipe cut out. Now I need to add a flat surface right where the stem is to reference and drill my stem hole. So I just take it over to my oscillating belt sander, and a few seconds later I've got a nice flat edge that'll make it much easier to drill out my holes for the stem. But because we cut it down on the bandsaw, we lost our reference line. So I just take the ruler and I'm going to connect that line down lower onto the now kind of recessed stem portion so that we can make sure to get that lined up perfectly. Once I transfer that line onto the pipe, it looks something like this. Next, it is time to drill out our first hole for the stem. I say first hole because the stems come with this little nipple on the end of them. We want to drill a bigger hole for that nipple to sit tightly into. So I grab a bit that is just a hair smaller, like a 1/64 of an inch smaller than the actual stem nipple. And I'll show you why here in just a second. And yes, I did just say that that bit is just a hair smaller than the nipple. Get your mind out of the gutter. After our hole is drilled, you can see the nipple doesn't quite fit in there. Yes, haha, nipple, nipple, nipple. So this is where I like to just take some sandpaper and just lightly sand until we get a nice tight fit. The last thing you want is for your stem to be loose in your pipe and flopping all over the place. So the best way to get a tight fit is to under drill the size of that hole and then bring it down to just the right size with a few light passes of sandpaper. You just want to make sure and go slow and not take too much off at once. But as you can see here, we've got a nice friction fit that should hold securely and support the weight of our pipe. And it's actually starting to look like something at this point, but we're not done yet. Next, we have to drill our pilot hole through that stem hole and connect to our bowl. And you want this to just barely poke into the bottom of that bowl. So I reference it on the outside of the pipe with my pre-drawn lines, and then I add another piece of tape to act as just a stop gauge so I know I don't go too deep. Then I chalk the entire thing back up into my Rockler screw clamps, using a square again to make sure that it's perfectly in line with my drill bit, and it's also in the center of that nipple hole. Nipple hole. Then I just go to town and drill all the way down to my tape. Just like that. And at this point, our pipe should be all functioning. Let's see if it works. Ooh, sawdust. So you could stop here and smoke out of it. It is a fully functioning pipe at this point, but we still want to make it pretty, and that means shaping it and smoothing it until it shines. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trace around the outside of my stem. The goal is to get our wood to perfectly transition from wood to stem. So we want to make sure when we're shaping it not to go past this pencil line that you'll see right here. So as you're shaping, just remember, do not cross that line. Now you could shape the entire thing by hand, but why do that when we have modern power tools? So I like to start on the oscillating belt sander. This is just a quick way to remove a lot of material. You're not going to be able to shape the entire thing like this, but you can start roughing out all those corners and getting it more pipe-esque. Just be careful as you're roughing out the front of it that you're not accidentally grinding away at that stem. Don't cross that pencil line. You can use the corners and the curves of the oscillating belt sander, and you can start to get a pretty good pipe shape going on. In just a few minutes, I was able to round over all the major corners, and it's starting to take shape. This is where more of the artistic process comes in. Like I said, there's really no wrong way to shape a pipe as long as you're not taking too much off or grinding into your bowl. How it looks is completely up to you. At one point, I decided to put the stem back on. I do this sometimes just as an added reference of how far down I can sand. You just want to make sure not to nick that stem. We are going to sand the whole stem down, but a big nick from the oscillating belt sander could be a little more than you want to sand out. After I've done as much as I can with the belt, I remove the belt and I switch it out for a small spindle. I think this is a 1/2 inch spindle. This is going to allow me to get a lot tighter into those little grooves and nooks and crannies and much closer to our final pipe shape. So with my spindle installed, the next thing I do is take some green tape and I wrap it around that stem. We're going to try and bring that wood down pretty close to the stem at this point, and the tape's just a little added security in case we get a little too crazy and nick it with that spindle. Like I said, we are going to sand the whole thing down here in just a little bit, so you don't have to be too worried, but it will save you some work on the back end. With the spindle installed, I just keep working the material down, getting more and more refined on my pipe shape. Slow is the name of the game here. You can always take more off, but you're never going to be able to put any back on, so go slow. Eventually, you'll run out of places you can hit with that spindle, and it'll be time to switch over to the good old hand tools.
Well, hey there. This video was sponsored by a company I guarantee you've heard of them before because they're like the best in the biz, and that is Bosley. Guys, have you started losing your hair? Maybe you're thinning a little bit. Maybe you're worried you're gonna lose your hair at some point. Well, you should check out Bosley because they are America's #1 hair restoration experts. That's right. You find yourself just wearing a hat all the time because you don't want people to see the top of your head? Well, here's the thing with hair loss. The sooner you do something about it, the better the results are gonna be. There is a reason millions of men and women have come to Bosley for the answers to their hair loss and hair restoration questions. People trust Bosley. They are truly the leaders in hair restoration. They have the most experience restoring hair, and let me tell you, experience matters. The sooner you take action, the more options you have. Learn how you can get a fuller, thicker head of hair by going to bosley.com/bourbonmoth, or click the link below to get your free information kit and a $250 off Bosley gift card. That's bosley.com/bourbonmoth. And you get a free cost estimate and find the right solution for you. You see, Bosley offers the latest hair restoration technology and one-day procedures for both surgical and non-surgical options. So whatever level you're at, whether you're just starting your hair loss journey or it's something you've been wanting to take care of for a while, Bosley has a solution for you. So definitely check them out.
When you're ready to start shaping with hand tools, I just grab a variety of different rasps and files and a good bottle of whiskey, because you're gonna be here a while and you might need a drink from time to time. Now you can see I got this one section that I couldn't quite get into with the spindle. For this, I love using a small round file or a rat's tail, and I just start working in there, getting all those angles and just kind of folding everything over till it runs together nice and smooth. There's really no fast way to get through this process. It's a labor of love. You're just going to be filing and sanding and filing and sanding. Oh, and drinking whiskey from time to time. And then doing a little more filing and sanding. Just keep in mind the shape that you have in your head, and when it gets to that shape, well, you're done. Kind of. But not quite. I really break up the pipe making into two main parts. There's the shaping, which we're still doing now with the hand tools, and when you're done with the shaping, that's when we'll switch to the sanding and finishing. After you think you've got the general shape looking the way you want it with the hand tools, as you can see, it's pretty rough and bumpy, but that's okay. We're pretty close to being done with the shaping. We might do a little bit more with the sandpaper, but we've removed all the major amounts of material we want. So I like to start with 120 grit sandpaper. You could go up to 80, but in my opinion, 120 is plenty to start taking down those bumps and ridges and all the scarring left behind by your rasps and files. This is also a good time to work on that transition from pipe to stem, and this is where we're actually going to start sanding our stem. Now don't worry, we are scratching it all up, but I will show you how to buff it and shine it as if you never touched it. The ultimate goal here is to have a seamless transition from your stem to your pipe. So if you close your eyes and run your finger along that seam, you can't really tell where the stem stops and the pipe begins. And the best way to do this is just to sand them both together while they're connected. As you can see, we're starting to get a nice, smooth transition there. When you feel like you've gotten rid of all the bumps and grooves, it's time to stop shaping and start really sanding. So we started with 120, then we're going to go to 150, and then we'll go to 220, and then after 220, we'll head over to 320, and then after 320, we'll switch it up and go to 400, and then after 400, we'll go to 600, and then after 600 we'll go to 800, and then after 800 we'll finish it off with flipping 1,000. Holy cow, I'm gonna be here forever. But if you want a shiny glass-like pipe, this is how you do it. Hold on to your hats, grab your whiskey, let's do some frickin' sanding. While I sand, I like to listen to the Shop Sounds podcast with yours truly. You should check it out. After sanding all the way up to 220, I decided it was time to work on this top portion. Now I made the decision early on to leave this raw, but it still has this bark on here. I found the best way to get rid of this bark is to just use a wire brush. I don't want to sand the top because I want to leave that natural edge of the briar block. So the wire brush does a great job at just removing that bark and leaving everything else beautiful and natural, just as you see here. A really cool texture that you just can't duplicate and don't want to hurt by sanding it away. I also wanted to take this time to work on my stem. As you can see, it's stock and just straight, but I thought it would look better with a nice curve or arc to it. Now the nice thing with these stock vulcanite stems is that you can bend them pretty easily. I like to use a heat gun. You just warm the stem up nice and thoroughly, making sure not to get the heat gun so close that the vulcanite starts to bubble. Once it's warm enough, all you gotta do is, well, bend it. And the cool thing is, if you hold it in that bend for just 20 or 30 seconds, it'll start to cool down, and as it cools, it'll stay locked in that shape. So you could really bend this thing in a full circle if you wanted to. Just don't pinch that internal hole, or else you're not gonna be able to smoke out of it. But our bend was slight enough, we didn't even have to worry about that. Still flows nicely. And then it's back to sanding. One thing I will mention about sanding the stem, you'll notice that I only go part way up the stem, but with each grit I go a little farther and a little farther. This is just a helpful way to transition your sanding on the stem and make sure you can buff everything out at the end. It doesn't take long for a nice smooth pipe to emerge, and you can really start to see what this thing's gonna look like. So we keep sanding. From 220 to 320 to 400, and finally we've made it all the way up to 1,000 grit. Whew, that was a lot of sanding. Then before I do anything else, I like to take some mineral spirits and wipe the entire thing down. This is twofold. Number one, it'll remove all the dust and get us ready for finishing, and number two, it'll just allow us to double check and make sure we didn't miss any big scratches or gouges. This should show and highlight any imperfection, but it's looking pretty darn good. You can start to see all that figuring and color pop out of that briar burl, and it is looking sexy. And if we wipe a little on the stem, that's looking nice and clean as well. I think we're finally ready to get some wax on this thing and make it shine. To wax your pipe, I like to use carnauba wax, and I just use my standard bench grinder. I get one of these cotton buffing wheels, and I take the grinder off one side and just attach this cotton buffing wheel in its place. As you can see, this is just a bunch of tightly sewn together pieces of cotton fabric that we'll use to get the wax on our pipe. So I just plop it on there, add my nut, and tighten it down. And this is going to spin pretty darn fast, as you can see here. so you're gonna want to be careful. Now the way the wax is transferred onto the pipe is through heat. Basically you rub the wax against the spinning buffing wheel, that transfers it onto the wheel, and then as the friction is caused from the wheel onto the pipe, it heats up the wax and transfers the wax onto the pipe. You do want to be careful during this process. That buffing wheel is spinning so fast, if you're not holding on tight, it'll launch that thing out of your hands and go flying across the room, and you'll be right back to the sanding stage. Which, trust me, you don't want to go back to that. So you just keep buffing, adding some more wax when you feel like you need it, and in no time you will have coated the entire thing in a beautiful layer of carnauba wax, and it should be shining like the setting sun. Or a diamond, or whatever you want to compare it to. It's shiny. Let's just leave it at that. And then you're going to do the exact same thing to your stem. In my opinion, you don't need quite as much wax to get the stem nice and shiny. It's more just the heat and friction on the stem that buffs all those scratches out. And after I use the buffing wheel, I like to take the stem over and just kind of finish hand polishing it with a cotton rag. And boom. You would never be able to tell that we, at one time, sanded this with 120 grit. It looks like glass. And with that, believe it or not, our pipe is complete. The only thing left to do is shove our stem into the wood pipe head, and, well, you've got a beautiful hand-carved pipe that you can use yourself or give away as a great gift. Now, to test this thing out. Looks like a pipe. Feels like a pipe. I look debonair as all get out, but something just doesn't feel right. Something feels wrong about this. Ah, that's better.
Forgot how gross these things were. Ugh. Did you see that? I almost did a perfect ship. Well, there you have it. A nice hand-carved pipe. Even if you don't smoke, which I gotta level with you, I don't really love smoking. It's kind of gross. But I still make them because they're so much fun to make. Everything you need is down there in that video description. Click the links, check it out, make yourself a pipe. This is just a fun exercise for any woodworker. Whatever your skill level is, you can make a functional pipe. No, can't do it. Ugh.
Cold feet, a dark rain.